So, Dungeons & Dragons Dark Alliance is being delisted officially. The co-op RPG will remain purchasable up until that date, after which the base game and its DLC will remain playable offline in single player only. In other words, they're shutting down all of the servers, as they say here. We will be shutting down the Dark Alliance servers on February 24th, 2025, and it will no longer be available to purchase starting that day. I mean, for one, you might be like, what's this game? Dark Alliance, this was like a reboot of an old franchise that kind of died out and then they brought it back. But this particular version was just really rough. It was buggy. It was just frankly not good. And as a result, player counts have been abysmal. I mean, we're talking right now after this announcement, they are at 5 players. And you notice these gaps in this chart? That's because there are regular periods where there are no players online. There's not a single person planet-wide playing this game. A lot of it, and I don't know what this is, but there's occasions where like only one person is playing it, 2, 3, 11. But on the whole, like all of Friday, November 22nd, only 3 people played, or a peak of 3 players played. You know, these are not sustainable player numbers for servers. And even if the servers were on, I mean, this is worldwide. So if there's somebody playing in Albania and then you have somebody else playing in San Francisco, I don't think that matchmaking would even be worth it. You know, so they're probably playing solo anyway, but they've announced they're going to delist it. So you will no longer be able to buy it, and they're shutting down servers. So it will only be available offline. I appreciate there is an offline version, for one, that amazingly enough is not a given nowadays. A lot of these formerly online games don't often have that implemented. So there's just, once it's gone, it's gone. There's nothing you can do. So I appreciate that there is the way to do that. I remember watching a few reviews for this because I was wondering if it was going to be good, but it just was buggy and boring and the combat was bad and it just didn't work. But it's going to be shut down. It's going to be closing its doors and they're going to be moving on. Now you might be wondering, what are they moving on to? Well, this is actually one of the interesting little tidbits. You might see this developer name, Tukwe Games or whatever. If we Google that, Tukwe Games, they have been renamed Invoke, and Wizards of the Coast announced that they, that's 2022. Yeah, so they rebranded everything. They redid all of that. Sure, I accept your cookies. They are an autonomous independent studio. Okay. A rapidly growing team. They have people that formerly worked on games, a lot of them at Ubisoft, like Splinter Cell, the OG Far Cry games, for example. But interestingly enough, we talked about this in a previous segment too. Let me see if I can find it. Invoke Studios, they've posted job listings and stuff because they are working on some big unannounced D&D game. We are working on a AAA game set in the world's most iconic role-playing game or role-playing universe, D&D. It's a privilege to enter this world, let our imaginations run wild and play a part in its legacy. And apparently they've hired a ton of people as well. So the studio's grown a ton. With all this said, they are working on something big that has justified them like doubling their team size, apparently. Still unannounced, but potentially we hear about it soon. But this to me seems like a further like pivot away from everything about Dark Alliance. I think Wizards of the Coast probably was not too thrilled with how this went. And I don't think these guys were too thrilled with how it went. So they rebranded the entire studio. The job listings, I've been looking at them. It's a lot of people with experience. They're asking for experience with like single player adventure games. So to me, it suggests that they're trying to like totally rebrand and refocus, which is interesting. So I like this, of course, it's always a bummer when we hear that something's being delisted. The literal 5 people playing it, I'm sure will be frustrated that it's been delisted, I guess, but they also will still be able to play it offline, which I think is about the best way you could handle this type of thing. Allowing it to continue being available for sale would just mean that more people could buy into it with a bad experience, bad servers, and you know, the only better solution would be if they could also patch in like peer-to-peer stuff to still allow for co-op if players wanted that. But again, like there is a point where like you only have 5 people playing, like 5 across the planet. I can understand why maybe they're like, it's just not worth the effort. Like even having Jim work on it for a Friday afternoon is probably not that reasonable to do. I get it. I get it. It's still frustrating. It's still disappointing that anything has to be delisted. But, you know, hopefully this is just the final closing of the Dark Alliance chapter, and the studio can move forward. Because it's not typical, again, for a studio to put out something really, really rough and get a second chance. It's also really, really uncommon for them to put out something really poorly received, get the second chance to make another game, and get greenlit to hire tons of people and spend tons more money. Hopefully that means whatever they're working on has a lot of potential. That's the hope, but time will tell. But yeah, if you're one of those 5 people that was still playing Dark Alliance, I'm sorry. Soon it will only be single player, and you will not be able to play with your friend